Hi everyone, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to share a few thoughts on Simple Passion by Annie Ernaux. This was published about 35 years ago, and it is a novella, a long story in which Ernaux gives voice to a narrator that it's recounting this two or 3 year affair that the narrator's having. Perhaps reflects Ernaux's own life, an example of early autofiction from our current craze in literature. But it aims for a voice that is simultaneously vulnerable and yet also formed. There's a sense of self and confidence that exists within this voice, but there's also this dual anxiety. The voice is crystalline, it's there, it's formed, but if the waves of emotion and the waves of circumstances for this narrator coincide in just the right way, it could shatter this crystalline voice, this figure. And so that's, I think, that the greatest strength of Simple Passion. There are aspects of the book that feel very close to the autofiction that some absolutely love and absolutely denigrate, in something like My Struggle by Karl Ove Knausgaard, where there is a litany of details in terms of media, in terms of the mundane. But there is also this emotion behind the voice that I think really does work and works well within this shorter format. So I did want to read a few sections that I felt were representative to what the narrator was saying within the book. In front of people I knew, I tried not to betray my obsession by words, although to exercise such self-control continually is extremely taxing. At the hairdresser's one day, I saw a talkative woman to whom everyone had been speaking perfectly normally until she announced, her head tilted back over the basin, "I'm being treated for my nerves." Immediately the staff stiffened and addressed her with distant reserve, as if this irrepressible confession were proof of her insanity. I feared I would also be considered abnormal if I had said, "I'm having a passionate love affair." Yet when I was among other women at the supermarket checkout or at the bank, I wondered whether they too were wrapped up in a man. If they weren't, how could they go on living this way? That is to say, judging by my previous standards, with nothing else to wait for but the weekend, a meal out, the gym class, or the children's school results. Things for which I now felt aversion or indifference. When someone confided in me, a man or a woman who admitted they were having or had had a crazy love affair with a guy, or a very close relationship with someone, I occasionally felt like opening up. But once the excitement of sharing our secrets was over, I resented having let myself go, if only a little. Those conversations, when I had continually responded to the other person by saying, "Me too, it's the same for me, I did that too," suddenly seemed futile, removed from the reality of my own passion. Rather, something was lost through these outbursts. And there's this sense of doubt, I think, that exists for the narrator. It's a sense that perhaps, not that she has a sense that what she's doing is wrong or immoral. That's not what it is. It's this sense of difference, of uniqueness, that there's something in her life that makes her feel unique and vital in this moment. And that's what this happens to be. And that as soon as it's given voice to, like an idea, it starts to suddenly either feel too fragile and can be broken up by other people's hands and actions, or it seems to just drift away. It's given voice to, and suddenly it's just in the air and can just dissipate. And this question of how will this end, when is this going to end, even the narrator's conscious decision about wanting to write down this experience, this story in her life, is sort of just, let me finish this story of what's been happening, and then these things don't matter as much. She says later, strangely enough, these very constraints bred waiting and desire. As he always called me from telephone boxes whose functioning could prove erratic, quite often when I picked up the receiver there was no one on the line. After some time I realized that this fake phone call would be followed by the real one, 15 minutes later at the most, the time it took to find a phone booth in working order. That first silent call was a prelude to his voice, a rare promise of happiness, and the interval separating it from the second call, when he would say my name and "Can we meet?" One of the most glorious moments ever. And there is a wistful sense to this relationship where the narrator shares these moments of how, if this is a crucial moment in her life, why is it? Why does she feel that way? How does it make her feel? We do get that sense. That is part of the vulnerability of what Ernaux shares through her narrator. And then towards the end, there's a sort of almost like self-conscious, postmodern, like true autofiction aspect to it, where she writes, I have the impression that this last visit never took place. It doesn't belong to our story. It's just a date, 20th of January. The man who returned that evening wasn't the man I was carrying inside me throughout the year when he was here and when I was writing about him. I shall never see that man again. Yet it is that surreal, almost non-existent last visit that gives my passion its true meaning, which is precisely to be meaningless, and to have been for 2 years the most violent and unaccountable reality ever. And the way she describes that moment, this dueling sense of, wait, is this real? This is the most real concrete aspect she's putting in here. She's putting an actual date on it. She's telling us the memories of this visit, and yet to say, but on some other level, on this emotional level, on this other side of her experiences, that was also not necessarily the most concrete. Everything had ended before that visit really happened. That last visit was a period, but the actual sentence before that period is what's important. And that was, I think there was a real sensibility to that, this idea that many times people talk about this fumbling through a relationship or a decision, and they make the decision, but the decision was already made, or the change occurs, but the change already happened, some days before, some months before, some years before. And so I was curious reading this. I wasn't absolutely blown away by it, but there were aspects of it that I returned to. And because it's so short, I was able to go back, reread some passages, and sort of try to find some more of those connections that I hope Ernaux was trying to put together for a reader. And I'm curious if others have read her work, if this is representative of her work. I've got a copy of The Possession, which I'm going to try and read as well and see what I glean from that. But I definitely did think of autofiction more explicit and implicit. Certainly with explicit, I thought specifically of Deception by Philip Roth, where the entire novel, it's a short novel, the entire novel is really dialogue between a couple of characters, primarily two characters who are carrying on an affair. And I felt it is autofiction, but in it, because it's almost all dialogue, it's pretty explicitly dialogue, that gives it a sense that it's even more artifice, a more experimental side of autofiction, perhaps, than what Ernaux was doing. Certainly Frederick Exley's A Fan's Notes comes to mind, one of the great sort of early examples. And as I mentioned, My Struggle by Nausgaard. I'll link my video on book 1 in the description box below. But I also thought of novelists who were writing something that approximate this level of desperation, of vulnerability. And one that really came to mind was Die My Love and Feeble Minded, and then ultimately Tender by Ariana Harwicz. I think these books get at a woman's voice, and that's just so raw and relentless in a way that is, I think, truly masterful. Sylvia Plath came to mind. The way that Lispector writes works that aren't autofiction, but they give this distinct voice and have this feel of being inside and outside of the story at the same time, whether it's The Hour of the Star or the more philosophical Ava Viva. Certainly I would add Confessional Poets and Sexton, Snodgrass, others of that school who I think were really close. And then finally, in terms of sort of the sexual jealousy that can define a life, certainly Proust, and particularly I would say volumes 5 and 6, Prisoner and the Fugitive, of In Search of Lost Time, really get at that. So let me know. I wasn't necessarily passionate about A Simple Passion, but I was interested. So let me know what you think of Ernaux. Hope everyone's doing well. Thank you.